Evelyn Romadka had it all: beauty, youth and status. Married to a millionaire business owner, it seemed like she was destined for a life of luxury. Yet by 1907, both her marriage and reputation were in tatters. So what happened to her? Was she set up in some way, or did she really become a criminal mastermind? Join me, Briefcase, narrating on the Forgotten Lives channel, as we go to 19th century Wisconsin. Evelyn Kane was born in the late 1880s in the city of Oshkosh in Wisconsin. She came from a family of decent means, as her father, Mr. P.J. Kane, owned a small rubber plant in the city. There are very few surviving accounts of her early life, but we can assume that she had a respectable upbringing, as she was very well educated. After completing her education, she became a school teacher in a small town in the northern woods of Wisconsin. Everything indicated that she was destined for a good but fairly unremarkable existence, but her life would take an unexpected turn. One day, on her way to school, Evelyn crossed paths with a young gentleman named Charles Romadka, who was on a hunting expedition. He was affluent and the owner of a trunk manufacturing business. Evelyn, while modest by comparison, was beautiful and full of ambition. An innocent little flirtation followed, and Evelyn, only 16 years old at the time, was swept off her feet by the charms of this dashing millionaire. It wasn't long before the two were married, much to the dismay of Charles's family. They objected to the union, primarily due to the differences in religious beliefs, but Charles stood firm. He married Evelyn, and together they began what seemed like a perfect life. Soon they had a daughter, and it appeared as though their future would be bright, but the fairy tale would not last forever. After the birth of her daughter, Evelyn fell dangerously ill. Despite all the efforts to save her, her condition worsened, and an operation became necessary. The best doctors were called upon to save her life, but after her surgery, something was different. The trauma of the procedure seemed to have altered her in ways no one could fully explain. Her once warm and loving demeanour shifted. She became withdrawn, restless, and a shadow of her former self. Her family and friends tried to put it down to the stress of the illness, but those who knew her best began to notice a disturbing change. The vibrant young woman they had known had become distant and at times cold. Some speculated that the operation had left a lasting mark on her psyche, while others wondered if this was the beginning of something far more serious. One day in 1907, Evelyn vanished. Her baby girl was around 5 at the time, and as the days passed, her husband became more and more worried. She was seen in Milwaukee, but when she reappeared, she was in Chicago, a city that would become the backdrop for her most notorious actions. She checked into the Victoria Hotel under an assumed name and began to live a double life, one that was entirely at odds with the life she had once known. In the months before leaving her family, Evelyn had begun reading stories about criminals, and she soon became obsessed with wanting to meet real crooks. During her stay at the Victoria Hotel, she met one Mr. Jones, who was working as a hotel cleaner. According to her account, after asking him for the time, he responded by getting out a fancy pocket watch, which was clearly designed for a lady. Mr. Jones then gave Evelyn a secretive look. She later spoke about this event and said, "A strange thrill crept over me, and here I was, face to face with my dreams." In Chicago, Evelyn immersed herself in a world of high society. She frequented elegant cafes, mingled with the elite, and was seen with men who would later be described as her type. But there was something sinister lurking beneath the surface. While living in Chicago, Evelyn began a peculiar and dangerous new chapter in her life. Posing as a maid, she obtained positions in the homes of wealthy families. It was in these luxurious households that she honed her craft. She wasn't there to serve. No, Evelyn had one goal: to steal. She carefully studied each home, familiarizing herself with the layouts. She learned where the family jewels were kept and noted the routines of the residents. She would spend just enough time in each home to gain the trust of her employers. Then, when they were away, she would strike. There are reports that she would ransack every room, searching for anything valuable, especially jewelry. Once she found it, she would carefully and discreetly take it. Then, once she had all these possessions, she would take them to her lover. Her lover was none other than Mr. Jones, the cleaner she had met at the Victoria Hotel. He was black and lived in Chicago, and although some people called him Albert, his actual name was William. This man seems to be the driving force behind Evelyn's crime spree, as he seemed to encourage her to steal. Then he would take the stolen goods and sell them on the black market. Evelyn in turn showered him with expensive gifts, using the wealth she had stolen to keep him happy. But this crime spree would not go unnoticed. After continuing these operations for some time, detectives finally caught wind of her after a robbery at the Beck household on South Park Avenue in Chicago. On Labor Day, Mr. and Mrs. Beck were absent from home, but had neglected to lock the front door. It so happened that in leaving the house, the couple was seen by Evelyn. She boldly entered the property and ransacked every room. In one of the bedrooms, she found a large alligator skin pocketbook, which contained more than $1,000 worth of jewels. When Mr. and Mrs. Beck returned home later, they discovered the robbery and immediately notified the police. Lieutenant James V. Larking arrived and began to investigate. Mrs. Beck gave him a complete description of what had been stolen, including the pocketbook and the jewellery that was inside it. A short time later, Lieutenant Larking stepped into the Baltimore Inn, one of the fashionable cafes in Chicago. While dining there, he happened to notice a well-dressed woman at a nearby table, in the company of a prominent Chicago businessman. It was not the woman that attracted Lieutenant Larking's attention. It was in fact a large alligator skin pocketbook that the woman carried, and which she had placed in full view on the table. Lieutenant Larking immediately began to investigate. When the woman left the cafe, he followed her. He then made some rather sensational discoveries. He learned that the woman, whom he suspected, was none other than Mrs. Evelyn Romadka, a prominent member of Milwaukee society, and someone who is reputed to be very wealthy. Somewhat alarmingly, Larking found out that Mrs. Romadka was prone to strange whims and fantasies. Among other things, she apparently delighted in posing as a maid and seeking employment in the homes of the wealthy, only to remain at a place a few days and then disappear. All these deductions only strengthened his first impression that she was the woman responsible for a number of mysterious robberies in Chicago. The case was beginning to unravel, and soon the truth about Evelyn's activities would come to light. On the 16th of October 1907, she was arrested. She was then escorted to the police headquarters, where she was questioned at length. The news of her arrest sent shockwaves through the family and the society that had once adored her. Her husband Charles was notified, and he rushed to Chicago. No one seemed to be more surprised than he was, as he learned that his wife had been accused of burglary. At first, Evelyn claimed that the leather pocketbook and jewels had been given to her by her husband, but later she confessed to having committed the robbery, together with many other thefts in Chicago. Upon hearing this, Charles was devastated. He could hardly believe that the woman he had loved, married, and built a life with could have been involved in such a series of shocking crimes. But the most shocking details came when Evelyn confessed that the jewels she had stolen were not for herself. They were gifts for her lover, Mr. William Jones. Evelyn showed no remorse for her actions, and even went as far as to say that she preferred her lover to her husband. Charles was left stunned. His wife, the woman who once seemed so perfect, had not only betrayed him, but had ruined his reputation in the process. The scandal led to the inevitable. Charles filed for divorce, and he was granted sole custody of their daughter. The Romadka family, once a symbol of wealth and prosperity, was shattered. The Romadka Trunk Manufacturing Company, which had previously been a thriving enterprise, began to falter. With Charles out of the picture and his personal life in turmoil, the company struggled. His brothers, eager to distance themselves from the scandal, forced him out. By 1912, the company filed for bankruptcy. Charles was now a shadow of his former self. He had lost everything: his wealth, his reputation, and his family. He remarried, but spent the rest of his days in relative obscurity, working menial jobs just to get by. Though Evelyn was in police custody, William Jones was still on the loose. She told the police that she could not recall the name of her African-American lover and refused to divulge any information to help the ongoing investigation. In the meantime, she was locked up. Lieutenant Larkin searched Evelyn's apartment and discovered a small slip of paper which contained several telephone numbers. He traced each of these and finally discovered that one telephone number brought him to the home of her lover. When the officer called, a woman answered, saying that she was William's wife and that he wasn't there. The lady said that she did not know where her husband had gone or when he would return. Lieutenant Larkin managed to find rooms near the house and succeeded in rigging up an extension telephone line which connected directly to the wire leading to William's home. He waited for results, and in a short time a call came. He heard a woman at one end advise the man at the other that detectives had called at the house and that he better remain away for some time. Larkin also heard the man instruct the woman to destroy a certain trunk and stash the contents. A police raid on William's home quickly followed. Detectives confiscated the trunk, and it was immediately taken to police headquarters and opened. Many of the articles that Evelyn had confessed to stealing from the homes of wealthy Chicago people were found inside the trunk. Lieutenant Larkin also learned where William was hiding and was soon able to arrest him. While in custody, many articles Evelyn admitted stealing from the homes of wealthy Chicago people were found in the trunk. Lieutenant Larkin also learned where William was hiding and soon arrested him. While in custody, William told the officers that he had taught Evelyn the business and boasted that he had an evil influence over her and that she had been a tool in his hands to do with as he pleased. In all, the couple had stolen and processed around $25,000 worth of goods, which is around $800,000 today. On the 15th of November 1907, Evelyn Romadka and William Jones were put on trial. Both were found guilty and convicted. Evelyn of burglary and William of receiving stolen property. Both were given what was described as an intermediate sentence, and they were to serve between 1 and 20 years in prison. This ended one of the most sensational cases ever brought to the attention of the police, and a case that at the time had attracted nationwide publicity in the press. But Evelyn's story didn't end there. After serving time in prison, she was released in 1910, but she had learned nothing from her past. If anything, her time in prison had only emboldened her, pushing her deeper into the world of crime. By 1911, she was suspected of being the ringleader of a notorious group of female thieves known as the Vampire Women. These women, under Evelyn's leadership, drugged wealthy men in Chicago nightclubs by slipping sleeping powders into their drinks. When the men passed out, the women would steal whatever valuables they could find, which included cash and jewelry or anything of worth. The stolen goods would then be taken to a fence and sold on. One such incident occurred when Evelyn and her gang targeted a Kansas millionaire who was in town for business and pleasure and hooked up with one of Evelyn's girls. Evelyn and the girl managed to put a sleeping powder into his drink, and then they stole nearly $1,000 in cash and jewelry. After regaining consciousness and discovering that he had been robbed, the man reported the incident to the police. He was shown a book of mugshots and was soon able to confirm that one of the photographs was of one of the women who had robbed him. The photograph was of Evelyn Romadka, but of course, she had been using an alias. Following this, the police apprehended many girls, most of whom confessed that they worked for a lady named Mrs. Graves. When they showed the pictures of Mrs. Graves to the girls, the police were able to confirm that Mrs. Graves was actually Evelyn, the lady who had been dubbed Queen of the Vampire Women of Chicago. Despite all this evidence, Evelyn's cleverness once again allowed her to slip away undetected. The victim had left town in a rush before he had been able to swear out a warrant, and although he had promised to return to do so, he never did. The police continued to try and trace Evelyn, but after 1911, the trail grew cold. There were rumours of her whereabouts. Some claimed she had fled to another city, others that she had assumed a new identity. But despite the numerous investigations, she was never captured again. Did she live out her days in hiding, blending into the shadows of a new life? Or did she fall victim of the very crime syndicates that she had once been part of? The questions linger, but the answers remain unsolved to this day.
Hey everyone, Forgotten Lives here, and thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you found it interesting. A big thanks to Briefcase for narrating it. If you liked his narration, be sure to check out his channel, it's awesome. I'll leave a link down below. And also a special thanks to Jason Lucky Morrow, who gave me a large part of the source material for this video. If you like the story, make sure to check out his website, The Historical Crime Detective. He's got a bunch of forgotten crimes and criminals, so highly recommended. Anyway, if you want more videos like this, be sure to let me know down below in the comments, and I hope you guys are subscribed and have notifications turned on to get all my videos as soon as I upload them. Anyway, that's all from me, so I'll see all of you in the next Forgotten Life. Thanks.